Willis.
My daughter Meghan. And what we thought, we're both hobby welders, and just thought we would, Ann asked us if we would talk about some of the things that we do. Again, give you a little description, and the way that this will work best is if I say something and you have a question, to just ask the question then, rather than we'll plow on ahead. And how long do we have, do you think?
We have an hour.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, well, so, you know, welding is the process of taking two pieces of metal and joining them with heat, okay? So there's a variety of different ways to do that. There are literally hundreds of kinds of welding processes, and what we're going to talk about today are just three or four that we do. And I think what we'll start out with is just some of the safety information. I think that's welding, I think, is
Big
very
part.
safe. Neither one of us have lost too many fingers or anything like that. Megan's worked as a pipeline welder on the Alaska pipeline for many years.
Many years. I'm a seasoned welder.
She's a seasoned welder, so she's still okay. But why don't you describe to everybody just some of the PPE or the personal protective equipment and how you use it?
Okay, I'll start with my jacket that I wear. This is, it has a logo with FR on it, meaning fire resistant, so I don't get caught on fire. So I just wear this to make sure if any sparks get on me, nothing becomes on fire. So I have this, and then
What about the rest of the clothes you wear?
I wear, I try to wear cotton pants or something that's at least mostly cotton, and then long socks. You don't want any ankle socks, and then if you can, leather shoes so that they don't catch on fire.
Sometimes in the
Flame
process
resistant.
of some of the welding we'll describe, you can have sparks come off of the metal. Most of the things that we do, we have a little shop in the backyard that Megan does a lot
The
of
man
welding.
shed.
The man shed.
The man shed.
Okay. And anyhow, in the man shed, the type of welding we do really doesn't have much spark or many fumes or any of that kind of thing. So she'll be describing the different kinds of welding we do and give you an idea of what we do in the shop. So,
Yeah.
okay, go ahead with the rest of your PPE.
Okay. I also have gloves that I always wear. So when I'm welding and when I'm just moving around the shop to protect my hands. And then I have my helmet, which is, what is this?
Auto darkening.
Auto darkening, yeah. So it doesn't hurt your eyes. It's a big thing because the flashes from welding can really damage your eyes. So you definitely want to make sure you have a helmet. There's different levels that you can set them on, for how dark it is, and you want to make sure before you use your helmet that it's pretty dark. I have mine set at 13, 14, and 14 is the max, I'm pretty sure. So, but you don't want it too dark where you don't know what you're looking at. So
we'll pass that around right now before she puts it on, and you'll see there's a photo cell on the top, and the part that she's going to look through, you'll be able to see through it. If you hold it up, you can see through it, and it's transparent. It's sort of dark, but it's transparent. If you hold it up and hold it to the light, you can see that you'll see through it. But within a 25,000th of I believe a minute or maybe a second.
Something really
It's
fast.
a second.
Yeah.
As soon as you strike an arc with any of the welding processes, or if you're standing there and someone starts to weld, that instantly goes dark.
Yeah.
And it goes dark, like Megan said, to whatever shade that you might set it to.
Yeah.
Now, you're maybe used to seeing the welders, and a lot of people still use it, is a fixed shade glass. Where you buy a piece of glass, and it might be a shade 11, you mount it in a helmet, and that's where the welder does that, flips his head down, to get the hood to go down.
Yeah.
And there are people that really like that kind of helmet and prefer that over an auto darkening. But for us in the shop, this works out well because you can look down. We have a bright light, and we can line things up.
Yeah.
And then you can see it just fine. And as soon as you strike an arc, it becomes
darkens.
So.
Yeah. But underneath that helmet, for sparks that come off the welds, I have this little hat thing that goes like this. That's because when you have the helmet down, there's your top of your head's open, So you don't want any sparks flying up and getting in your hair, because that'd be pretty hot. I just wear this to protect my hair and head. And then what else? Safety goggles. I wear safety goggles because most of the time when you're working with like metal and stuff, you're like stopping, cutting stuff, grinding stuff, and then welding. So I just keep them on.
Even under your helmet?
Yeah, even under my helmet. It works pretty well. I actually have glasses. I have contacts in right now, but it fits. This pair I have fits over my glasses too. So even if you have glasses, you can still fit. They fit pretty well. So.
Okay. And I think that one thing that's real important is there are certain safety precautions that you take. Again, you're working with electricity, and because of that, you have to be careful and make sure that you don't do it. Now, there are people that do underwater welding and do that kind of thing. All the welding we do is in a dry environment, and we make sure that, let's say that you're about to weld and I'm in the room. What do you always say?
Eyes.
Okay,
Sure.
whenever one of us is ready to strike an arc, before we do that, what would happen if I was walking over here? What was your name? Fred. If Fred was about to strike an arc and I was here picking something up, and he did that, the flash from that would be very bright and could hurt your eyes. And so you'll always hear, I don't know that you're always here, but that's what we do.
Say something,
We
yeah.
say something like, and usually it's eyes.
Yeah.
And when you say eyes, you know to just turn away, and so you don't, whenever she starts to weld, she says eyes and lets me know that, that if I'm gonna watch something she's doing, I might have my own helmet on, and I can look up and see what she's doing. But most of the time, in the Meghan makes a line of products, and the things that she makes, she does all the welding on it. It's one of those things I don't want to say, oh, this is something Meghan did if I'm doing the welding. So she does the welding, and I might do some grinding, or if we have to cut something on a bandsaw, I might do that. So, let me just sort of give you a little idea about one of the styles of welding, and then Megan's going to talk about two other styles of welding. The type of welding that you probably see people do quite often would be what type?
Stick welding.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
And so we would have a thing called an electrode that is consumable when electricity passes through it, and it would clip into a holder like this, and this is what you might see someone use, and they'll take that and strike an arc, and the reason they call it that is they'll tip it on the metal, and an arc will start, and then you hold it there. Now, why don't you take this around the room and just show people what's on that. Here's another piece that
You can see like the white stuff surrounding it, but when you look in, you can see like the metal.
Maybe just describe it to everybody.
The rod.
And then you can.
Okay. So the white stuff like surrounding the rod is called flux, and that makes sure that when you're welding, it creates kind of like a protection from the weld to the air, right? So doesn't create.
If you just tried to weld, let's say this was a welding rod that didn't have flux on the outside, and I started to weld on it, at that high temperature, it would also incorporate air, that's just oxygen that's in the room, and the weld would be sparking and pitting and it would be a faulty weld.
Yeah.
So the atmosphere directly around the arc that you generate has to have some sort of a shielding gas, and what the type of welding that Meg does most of the time. Why don't you show that around everybody so they can see it. It's broken there a little bit so you can see where the flux is cracked off of the welding rod. I'll pass this one around. This is
a big spark plug.
This is a 6010 rod, which might be if you're doing a pipeline or something like that, that would be the first pass that you might make. But you'll see
I do not know, but it probably is.
And
Yeah.
that's the flux. And so as the spark, as that burns down, and that rod is consumed, so they'll weld until you get down quite a ways, and then you'll take that off and put another rod in there and continue to weld. And all the time it'll be generating the shielding gas around it from the flux. When that's done, you probably maybe have seen something like this called a chipping hammer, with that style of welding, the flux then deposits on top of the weld. And you have to take a hammer like this and chip that outer covering off. It looks like glass on top of it, and it'll come off in flakes, and you can use this hammer to get that the flux off. The one reason we don't do much of the stick welding is because it is smoky. We do have an evacuator that takes the air out of the building, but there's a lot of sparks that are generated. As it burns the flux off, it makes a lot of smoke also.
Yeah.
So that's something which, just in a small environment and the kind of welding we want to do. If you see people welding out in the field, like on a pipeline, that's usually the type, and the advantage to this is because it's a little more resistant to the wind blowing, so you can keep that shielding gas because of the flux is with it, and we'll show you some other things later, and they'll sort of tie together. But you also have the ability there are lots and lots of different kinds of rods. Again, you'll see this. This one is a E60, and this is a 7018. Those describe the tensile strength of the metal. This maybe will be, I think, 70,000 psi tensile strength with the metal that's deposited. And they're used for different kinds of applications. If you wanted to weld a special kind of a steel on a bridge, you'd have to get a special kind of a rod. But it's also sort of fussy again because of the spatter and the smoke.
Yeah, it's pretty, compared to the other types of welding that we do, it's pretty smoky and a little bit more sparky, and so I tried it once and it was pretty crazy. But it's not that bad, but.
Okay, so given that you'll see this type of welding, the stick welding, a lot of places, what the most common type of welding, and the kind that maybe you would be interested in to fix the lawnmower and that kind of thing, is something called a MIG welder, okay, a wire MIG welder. And what's MIG stand for, Megan?
Don't remember.
Metal?
And
Inert gas.
Inert gas.
Okay.
I was close.
You were close, yeah. You did great on that one.
Yeah,
But-
no.
So why don't you carry around the MIG gun. I've taken it off of the welder, and I'm going to show you how it works, but we took it off so we could bring it in, and she'll bring it around and show it to you and give you an idea. Okay. Instead of having to feed a rod in and continue to replace the rod, with the MIG welder, what it does, and this is a MIG right here, this machine that I brought in is a real handy thing because it is capable of doing a lot of different kinds of welding, and it's a portable. They've come out with a whole new line of welders right now, and they're, instead of, you might have seen in people's garages, they call them the buzz box, a big red thing there that you would do the arc type welding, but there are a lot of people that want to do hobby welding and make things and fix things, and they've come up with MIGs. That's see, it says MIG on it here. The MIG is neat because this particular style, the newer ones, and you can get these at Tractor, not this one, but you can get them at Tractor Supply and Home Depot sells. They have an inverter in it, so that instead of the old style welder, this one can be really small. I think it weighs like 40 pounds or something, and it has 210 amps of welding power, so it actually can weld thick things. I mean, and it will weld. I can weld with a stick. I can weld with a TIG welder, tungsten inert gas, and Meg will describe that one. And I can also do the MIG. What it has inside of it is it has a roll of wire, and I take this off, but it might just go zzz. So there's many feet of wire, and this wire that I'm using is 25 thousandths is the diameter. And she'll bring this around. Normally, I cut it last night. Normally, this is connected in the front of the machine here, okay, and the wire goes through, comes off of that roll and runs through a pinch roller here, which governs the speed that the wire will come out of the end of the gun. Okay? So it'll be between these little rollers in here, and show this anyhow, there's little rollers in here that will feed through between these, and there's a trigger on that. Once you carry this around, show them the wire and show them the trigger.
Okay. So for everybody to see, this is what you're holding when you're welding, and this is the trigger, and then this is where the wire comes out through the top. So I'll walk around so you can see it.
Pretty cool. We're ready, Mark.
There are different diameters of wires. You can buy different kinds of wire. That's a common, just steel. You'll notice one thing. I'll pass around a piece of wire that we use in the TIG, but even in that wire, you'll notice it's gold on the outside. It looks like copper. It's not copper, actually. It's just steel. But the steel would rust if it didn't have some coating on it. So they spray like a copper coating on the wire itself, and you can see the wire there. It has it looks gold, and that's just a very, very, very thin coating of copper on it, which keeps it from rusting. To make sure that this process, the MIG, doesn't combine with air, instead of using flux, like we saw on that rod, what it does is on the back of the machine here, it has a place. There's where I plug it in. And one thing that's really neat about the new model of welders, these inverter style, is that you can use it if you want to weld something really heavy. They have you can connect it to 220 volts in your house, so that it has the ability to have a lot of amps to weld thicker stuff. But most of the time you're going to want to weld like your lawnmower deck or a grill brakes or a chair brakes or something like that. Well, there's another pigtail for it, another plug, that will let you just plug it into the wall. So you can plug it into an outlet in the wall. It won't weld quite as heavy, but it will, from 95% of the things that Megan and I weld, it would weld just fine on 110. It doesn't need the heavier cord or anything like that. To protect the weld, simulate that you're welding here, Megan, with the MIG, okay? Okay. If she's welding along, if we didn't have some way to shield the wire and the spark, it would immediately corrode, and so the weld would be faulty. So in the back of the machine, there's a hole here, and I have several different kinds of shielding gases that you buy, and you can get them at like Lubinecki's, and I have small ones that are like this big, the size of a fire extinguisher. If I was going to go, I have a neighbor, Dave Rust, who likes to break things, and if I'm going to go over to Dave's house, he said, oh, the mower deck cracked or something like that. I'll grab my little bottle, my 110 plug, and I'll grab the MIG and head over, and it has a hose that connects to that bottle. There's a regulator on the bottle, and it puts about 15 cubic feet per hour, maybe. It's 15 CFH, I think is what it is. So when Megan pulls the trigger on that, there's a relay in here that opens the valve up. Gas flows through the machine, goes between these two little O-rings in here, which seal. So when this plugs, this would plug into the front of the machine here. When if it was in operation, this would be in here. So when she pulled it, and there's a control that I wire up here. So as soon as she does that, it tells the MIG to turn on. It tells it to start producing, to flow some of that gas. That gas will come through this hose. It'll come out of these little holes here, and it'll be distributed right around that piece of wire that's coming out. Okay, so it has shielding gas. The good part of it is that this whole process doesn't really spark much. There's not any smoke or anything else. It doesn't have flux that burns off. And when you're done, the weld that you're looking at is the weld that's finished. It's all right there. You don't have to do anything with it. It's
what
very
I
nice.
started with.
No chips.
No chipping.
Yeah.
And it's really a fairly easy process. I mean, there are lots of people that do this. I've always wanted to do this before I retired, and the Votech has a fantastic evening welding adult class. And there are, the guy that teaches it, Brad Custard, is excellent, very helpful. And if you show up for intro class, you'll start with him explaining some of the safety things, showing you a couple bits and pieces, but most likely, these days, people would start on the MIG. And he would show you how to set the MIG up and how to weld with it, and that would be sort of the first thing you do. And you could then go buy a MIG at the Home Depot, and you could fix things almost immediately, okay? The things that you vary when you do this, and this one's computerized, I don't have a plug, there's a little screen here, and it'll query you for questions and say, what are you going to, what diameter wire are you going to weld with? What type of shielding gas? For a MIG, you use 25% argon and 75% carbon dioxide. It comes mixed in the bottle. They're both inert gases, so they're not poisonous. I'm not saying you want to breathe them, but there's no effect of that gas on you at all. And it's a very, very small amount that comes out. So this would ask you questions about how thick a metal that you're going to weld, and through it you would just say, yes, I'm going to weld, say, see if I can find the gauge here, I'll pass it around. You might have something like this, and I'll pass this around. You can see it'll tell you the gauge on that. So you could say, oh, I'm going to weld a piece of metal, but if you're not sure exactly what the thickness is, you'd use that gauge to check the thickness. I'd dial that into the machine, and it would pick a speed that would run those little rollers and push this wire out. Okay, so it's going to bring the wire out maybe at anywhere from 100 inches a minute to 300 inches a minute, and also it will pick the amount of current that it needs to, actually in this case, voltage that it wants to put on it, and that the thicker metals would require higher voltage, and that would allow you to get deeper penetration on things. If you were welding something like a car fender, you wouldn't want to use you wouldn't want a lot of energy in it because that might warp it and get it too hot. So this one is handy because it does ask you very simple questions. If you didn't have a computerized one and you had something like you buy at Home Depot, some of theirs, or Farm and Tractor or something, they would have a list in here that would say, I'm going to weld 12 gauge and the kind of wire that I'm using, the diameter, and it would tell you how many inches you'd set the feed rate and what voltage. So if we said we're going to run 14 and we're going to use that say 25 wire or something, we might want 260 inches and 17 volts. And then you try it, and very quickly you get used to what's the right sound. When you're, what's it sound like when the MIG is running well?
It doesn't sound like choppy or kind of, it's pretty smooth, but it sounds like, I don't know, I can't make the sound, but it's like,
You'll be surprised that you very quickly get used to determining how the MIG is running by listening to it. It has a particular buzz that you'll learn when it's welding. It's sitting there going, bzzz. That's not exactly it, but something like but it'll, and then you'll look at the weld, and it's actually pretty simple. If we had a piece of metal, that's been TIG. Why don't you show them something you made here? Where you've got sort of a bumpy weld, Megan. I'm not sure if this is. And now, I don't know that we've got the right piece of metal here,
but it would be kind of lumpy, and it might have like spaces between it where it just wasn't the right, or it would melt into the metal because it was going to be set too high. So it just kind of melt the metal instead of fusing it.
If you were welding two pieces of metal together, and the resulting weld was a bumpy thing like a worm, okay, that's probably too cold. And you'd increase the voltage, and what it'll do is that'll smooth down and not be such a bumpy weld. And you'd call that like a worm weld or something. But pretty soon, and what I wanted to sort of explain to everybody tonight, and Meg will say also, is that this is nothing that's impossible. It's probably,
it takes practice, but it's not, it's pretty just trial and error, just going through and just trying different things and seeing what works.
I'll show you something and this you can see, these were a little cold. This was something Megan welded up and that she did with the MIG.
Yes.
And you can pass that around, you can show them how the weld is sort of a little bit humpy on that one. And we'll describe what it is and we'll pass some things around.
Yeah.
That we're done with the MIG. Describe what this is.
Okay, so I ran cross country in the I ran cross country in the fall, and we hosted like a 5K for our fundraiser for like buses and stuff, and somebody made these, and they were pretty expensive, and they ended up. The money that we made from the race, we ended up having to pay the same amount that these, so we didn't really make any money. So we decided to make our own in a way cheaper version, so that's what these are.
Why don't you just walk these around and just show people what you did. So Fastenal had the nuts and bolts on sale, it happened, so we bought bags of nuts and bolts.
Very cute. Yeah, really cute.
It was a Halloween
This
race.
was the one that you
It's a house.
purchased, correct? This is
Yeah,
what you made.
these are the ones that, somebody else made them for the race, but they, very expensive.
They had to just charge some of their costs.
Yeah.
They were able to, Fastenal happened to have the right length of nuts and bolts
So they just
I bought like a pillow bag of each one of them for $20.
Oh my
And we
God.
can make enough trophies, and so that was what you're seeing there was sort of our first version of making one, and
Very cute trophy though.
and Meg just said that we took a little pair of vice grips and put the nuts together and twisted them to make the backbone, and then she would weld them up, and then we took the bolts, the longer bolts to make the legs and the shorter ones to make the arms, and just set them on the welding table, and then she used the MIG to tack them together and put them together. So the MIG process that you use is something that would be a super handy thing to have. The welding equipment that you need, a jacket like this is probably $20. You can buy a really expensive helmet, but one like this was, I think, we got it at Northern Tool for $39. It's an auto dimming. It works just as good as my $100 and some Lincoln helmet. The hat was $4 or something like that. And the gloves that you use for both the MIG process and I'll pass these around. If you were doing the stick welding, like you saw, you'd probably want a heavier glove. You've got a really hot thing, there's a lot of sparks and everything like that, and I'll pass these around. This would be a, what's that? I know. You're not supposed to trip my kid here. Hold this. But anyhow, so this would be a heavier glove, and you could touch hotter metal with it and that kind of thing. But what it doesn't have is a lot of really good feel. So why don't you take around your pair of, these are probably like a goat skin or something like that.
You feel the difference between
Those gloves she uses for MIG and TIG, and you've got a really good feel with it, and really with both the MIG and the TIG process, you're not touching. We'll talk about the TIG. You're not touching anything which is something like the TIG. You could probably sit there in a shorts and a t-shirt. There is ultraviolet that comes off it. You'll see a lot of TIG welders do that. You'll see them on television. But really, I've been told that the wavelength of the light coming off of the arc once you generate it is like a sunny day, and you don't want to have that, so you do want your body covered. Okay. So the MIG process is pretty inexpensive. You can do it with household current. You can do it in your backyard. You can do it in the garage. It doesn't have any sparks or anything else. I mean, it's a very, very clean process, and because of that shielding gas. And to refill the bottle, and I have a bottle about this big that's probably about $40. I can't remember how many cubic feet it is, I should have done that, but I take it to Lubanecki's and you bring it back and they just do an exchange and you pay $40 and you get another basically identical bottle to that. The MIG can also do something else, and I'll pass this around, you can't really see it, but this looks like ordinary MIG wire, but this is called Flux Core. And what you have is, imagine this is like the metal is like the banana skin, and the flux, instead of being around the metal, is incorporated in the very center of it. So as it's operating, this one you can weld things in the field without having shielding gas with you. So you can take the MIG with you to weld something, and this generates its own shielding gas. I'll pass that around. You really can't see it. In the thicker wire, they make much thicker flux core. And if you were going to weld a bulldozer, if you worked at Don John up in Erie welding boats or something like that, and you had to do lots of long passes, flux core is the type of welding that they do. You can put a lot of amperage in it. It's very, they use gas with it too, the shielding gas, but the combination of the gas that generates and the shielding gas makes it very friendly in windy conditions and that kind of thing, anything outdoors. And it can also take an awful lot of amperage or current through it, so it can weld really heavy things. So if you decided, you said, hey, I need to weld like cast iron furniture or something, you could adapt your MIG to run whatever wire you might want to run in it, and you just would use a different size pinch roller for a different size. I have these little wheels in here that grab the metal, or grab the wire, and these are set for, that's 35 thousandths, so that's thicker. I run 25 thousandths wire in there, but you can show those around to people. Okay.
So is there like a common size wire that you use?
Most everybody that, 25 thousandths would be, and you can buy a long, I'm trying to think how many feet that is. I mean, you buy this by the pound, that's like a 12-pound roll or something. You'd have to weld a whole lot to use that up. And I bet it's probably like $35 for a large spool. When you buy the welder, a lot of times they'll just have a 1 pound or a little spool like that of MIG wire that will come with it. And that might be enough to do any project you'd ever want to do. But I wanted to try and learn how to do it, and so I used a little bit more. Where'd you put this spool gun?
Now, you mentioned your welding table.
Yes.
Is that just?
You know what I did is one thing that's amazing these days is the internet has. You know, if I want to learn how to play a particular lead in a Jimi Hendrix song, I can just type Jimi Hendrix, Watchtower, and I'll get 20 people showing me how to do that. There are a surprising number of people that do welding videos, and they are super, super handy. I mean, you want to figure out how to TIG upside down and, a certain kind of metal or whatever, there will be 5 people that will show you how to do it, and there's some that are just excellent. There are also a lot of places where you can buy the things, and I have what's called a plasma table, and it's just a metal table with a bunch of slats in it. You know, you used to see people cut things with a torch, right? You know, the oxyacetylene torch and smoking and all that stuff. What they have now is something which is very much like a MIG, actually. It's a plasma cutter, it's called. Mine's small, much smaller than this. It has an air compressor built into it. And you just plug it in, it plugs into 110 or 220, and it makes a really hot arc, and then the air compressor blows the metal through. So you can cut things with it, and you can cut, if you can hold it, it's got a trigger on it like that, you can cut any design you want, and up to about that thick, it looks like you cut it with a bandsaw. Where when you're cutting with a torch, a lot of times the torch leaves are real thin, you gotta grind it. The plasma cutter makes a beautiful cut. It'll cut thicker things, but it's a much more ragged cut. So anyhow, the table I bought has these expendable metal slats about this big, and it's open pretty much. So if I wanted to cut a shape on this, and I had a piece of metal, and I wanted to put your name on it or make a picture that looks like the mountains or something like that, or a key holder or anything, I would put it on that table and bring and I have to ground so you'd have to, so just like the welder has a big clamp here. And I guess I went ahead of things, so I'm sorry. To make a welder work, it's got to have a passage of electricity through the whole system, right? So what you do is you have a metal table, and you clamp this ground clamp onto the top of the table. And what I did is I took just the metal table that I had that had these slats. I went to Lubinecki's and bought a piece of 3/16" metal plate. They make huge things, and so they have extra leftovers. And Chris there cut it for me, so it's probably about this big, I'd say. Top of the table, and it's heavy metal. And what's really funny is you wouldn't expect this, but that table is your friend. If you want to weld something that's really odd, we just weld it right to the table. I mean, if you had something that you wanted to weld and it was a funny shape, you know, Meg might hold it on the table and then just weld it on the table and it sticks up and you've got that metal connection. Otherwise, you just lay it. If I wanted to weld something on this, lay it on top of the metal table, I've got that ground clamp and the current goes through and you weld it. When it's done, you take when you've made a mess of the table and it's got stuff on it, you just take a grinder, here's just a battery-powered grinder, and you just, after you take it off, you bend it over until you knock it off, and then you just polish the table down. So your table just looks nicely scratched up kind of thing, but it's just infinitely usable over and over and over again, and it's so handy because if you do want to weld something that's a strange thing, and you say, I can't figure out how to brace that, you just weld it right to the table. And people when they first see it, what are you doing to your table? But again, you just grind it back off again, and Meg knows how to use the grinder and that kind of thing. So, and then also on the table, say we wanted to weld this on that. You just took some rebar and made these, we've got a whole series of these things, which just can, say I wanted to hold that like that, I might do this, you know, I might hold it on its side, I might do that. And so you have a series of these things on the table that are metal and they just help to conduct things. Before we get into the TIG, while we're still on the MIG, some of you might have something that's aluminum, a lawn chair or something like that. Well, the MIG has to push this wire, has to take this wire and push it through that long piece of, and you can't push aluminum. It just will fold up in there. So they make a thing called a spool gun. And a spool gun is exactly sort of like the MIG, and this is one here. I plug the gas end of it in to the same hole in the MIG, but I wouldn't expect it to bring any wire out. It has a little roll, like a pound roll of wire in here, and one of these is about $200 addition to and this is a nice one. So the wire's going to go, you can see this. Meg, why don't you show them how where the pinch wheels are and the wire feeds off of that. You can sort of carry it around and hold this part with it, and you can just show them how that works. So that's very much like the MIG, but it doesn't try and push aluminum wire all the way through that long constriction because it just won't do that. But that lets you weld aluminum. There are expendable things in a MIG. These little contact tips, these allow the current to come through the wire that's in here, and something's got to communicate that to the wire. And so that's this thing right here, which is replaceable. This thing that's black on that little copper thing on the end. These are tips that when that starts to wear down, or it might fuse to this, you take a pair of pliers, it's called a welder. The thing that everybody uses, this is a welder. There, someone says a welder. That's a welder's helper plier, okay? And that plier has got something that can nip the wire, and you want a certain amount of wire sticking out from the end of it, and it happens that the distance between this flat edge of it and the cutting edge is about right to give you that, they call that stick out. So you don't want the wire too far back in and you don't want it really far out where it's past the shielding gas. But we could take this one off and if it got, you know, just after use and replace it, and these are real cheap. Okay, so the wire comes through this and this acts as the contacting piece to contact to conduct the current to that wire. So that's how it gets, the current comes up to the end of the gun here, the gas comes out, mixes, and then the wire touches this at the end. The welder also is good if the end of this thing gets stuff in it, it's tapered there, so you clean the end of it out by just turning it. So it's a handy tool. So anyhow, if you needed to weld aluminum, you could buy one of these for a couple $100, and there are lots of different companies sell these kind of things, and this would enable you to weld if you had a aluminum wagon or whatever it might be, and it's basically the same process on the front of this machine. I would say when I was selecting things, I would say I'm going to use the spool gun. There's a switch inside of here that I would switch so it's not feeding this wire, and it transmits the ability for that little motor that's in there to push the wire out by just flipping that switch. So that's pretty handy. The type of welding that the two of us do most now
TIG.
is what?
TIG.
And what's that stand for?
Stands for
Tungsten? What's the IG for? Inert gas, right? Okay. What that is, and I'm going to show you, she's going to bring out, once you get the TIG torch out, and why don't we set up right here so people can see how you would do that. Get your amp control out, pedal and stuff, and you can set that up right here, sort of sideways, and that way people can see it, and you can show them how you do that. For those of the people that like to weld, this is the fun kind of welding. This is I think it's the most fun welding that there is. This is very similar to, remember if you'd ever see welding on the old days where people would have a torch and they would heat the metal up and then they'd add some metal to it. You see the guys with the goggles and a bunch of torches. This works on exactly the same process, but you generate the heat instead of a flame from a small arc. And the arc is generated, I'm going to pass these around. These are actually the tungstens right here. I'll pass two of them around. You're going to see this. Oh, that's not a tungsten. That's a piece of aluminum filler. I've got a couple. But I'm going to pass around these things that look like little darts. Okay? You can check these out. Okay? That's the tungsten electrode. Okay? And you take a sander or a grinder and you grind that point on the end of it. It starts out as a piece like this. Here's a smaller diameter. This is a 16th. It's just square on the end. Okay, so you have this and you buy a bunch of these, and I don't know how much they are. They're not very expensive. And when you're not a good welder like me, you touch sometimes that and you have to regrind it, which is why some of those are shorter than others. But really good welders can weld maybe a whole day with sharpening at one time. So, and as you get better, you can do that. So show them how that whole thing holds pieces in there. There's a clamp.
Yeah, there's.
She's adjusting the stick out now. That's how far it holds, okay?
And just taking it. And that's a little bit far out, but then you just weld.
And this thing right here
Pull out.
is called the cup. And it is a ceramic piece. And what it does is it helps direct the gas flow to around whatever you're welding. So if you wanted to weld something that was a real tight angle and really deep, you obviously couldn't get this down in there. So they make different extensions, different diameters of these depending on what you're going to weld. And so you'd choose whichever one. I've got a whole selection of those that are, like I said, longer or shorter or whatever. Well, why don't you sit down and here, set up your pedal here, Megan. Megan's gonna, I know when I first mentioned this to Don, I said, well, I'm gonna bring this and that, and I think he had a heart attack. You're not gonna weld in there, are you? Oh, sure we are. We're gonna build a boat. Oh, we can't do that. Well, anyhow, this is the controller, which for the TIG process, the tungsten inert gas, would be plugged into the machine, okay? And I have a different TIG welder, but this one will do it as well. So you plug this into the machine, okay? And when Meghan, just like a sewing machine, if she was gonna weld something, let me give you a piece of filler metal there. She'd have her helmet on, and you don't have to put all that, they'll just imagine her with this big thing. Okay. Show them how you do this, okay?
Okay, so you'd probably add mine at angle normally, and you make pretty close, but make sure you're not touching. And then you would press the pedal and then move along at a steady pace. And then because this isn't really adding any metal like by itself, so if it's just melting metal, you can add the metal because this would immediately melt this, and it would just smooth out as you went to form your speed line.
And these are some of the welds that she did. Now, you'll see this one on the end here. This weld is actually the welding instructor's weld. And these others were some that Meg had done. Because Meg came into the class with me in the evening and just to check it out. And he set her up in the corner, and it was really super cool because she'd done this before. And so she's over at a big 275 machine, and she's all set up. And here are all these guys that are in taking the evening welding class, and they're looking over. And here's Megan with all of her stuff on, and she's working on a project over there. They keep looking over like, oh, what the heck is going on here? But the point of it is that anybody can do it. And once we get out in the shop and start to weld, and she starts to make things, you know, we forgot to bring the wine bottle holders. Oh, shoot. The green shop downtown, Julie McClymon's, makes stuff and sells it there. There are different kinds of wine bottle holders. She makes and I'll show you some of the pieces of metal. But things like this was one of the first things, something like this. She just threw, this isn't done, but she just threw this together last night. You can pass it around. This is the kind of thing, she saw something on Pinterest. Was that what it was? Sorry. And she just said, Dad, I want to make this. So she had a picture of it, and we just had, finding metal is not tough. Any of that metal that we have there is just something that we got at Home Depot, some of it. And out at Lubinecki's, they have these big vats or pieces where they put cutoffs. And I buy their gas there, and Chris says, they take whatever you want. So most everything that we've ever made and made from scraps out there that they have, that they're just going to take and throw away, or not throw it, take to the metal recycler. And I think, you know, we give them enough business buying stuff that they just say, take whatever you want, and that's enough to pretty much make whatever we would ever think of making. Things that they cut off that they don't need anymore are big enough that we could do those. So I'll pass this around and look at this one side. You'll see the yeah, I'll tell you what, it's pretty neat that it takes a lot of practice to get good at this. But TIG would be the kind of metal, it's that kind of welding that if you were going to weld like on a nuclear submarine, or you want all the tool shops in town, the guys there are phenomenal TIG welders that have to do aerospace kinds of things at Accutech or something like that. And you'll see this one sort of a shiny weld that's very small. That's a beautiful weld, and that's from somebody that's welded for years and years and years. And then the ones next to it are some of Megan's practice welds. And in the class, what you'll do is
yeah, because you see my other side. I don't know, this was before you came over.
You know, she's great. She does a lot. We make all of her Halloween costumes.
Yeah.
I'm bragging on her. She's changed the tires and the wheels on the car since she's 7. But it's only recently that she's...
Jack the car up, had to put up my whole weight. I was like, back it up.
I took a
Good thing
class.
So the idea with TIG welding is to actually melt the metal and fuse them together. What is that? So that basically does not get consumed. You can go all day long if you know what you're doing and not use up the tungsten dart. What is that metal there? What is that?
This is basically to add metal in places that you
What kind of metal is that?
This it looks like copper
Yeah.
because they put copper around it too, so it doesn't like rust, but it's actually just
So steel, stainless steel.
And if you were going to weld stainless, you'd get, and that's one thing with the TIG, which is so nice, is you can buy any kind of wire that you want. I'll pass this around. This is a piece of, I think this is,
You can basically get any alloy that you
You
want.
can get any alloy that you want.
And it's especially critical for things like aerospace
Oh,
applications
absolutely.
where you know dissimilar metal or whatever.
Yep. And here's a piece of aluminum filler. So if we were gonna TIG, and this looks like a piece, I thought it was a tungsten, but it's not. This is just and that's a mild steel. You can buy, I didn't bring any, that's a very thin piece. That's a 16th, I think. But they make 336, there's a variety of different thicknesses. So if you were gonna try and TIG, you can weld things that are very heavy with the TIG too. TIG is slower. I mean, if you were gonna weld a boat or something, you wouldn't do it. But if you're gonna weld a bicycle or something, titanium or whatever, you probably would use another process. But for a lot of the things we do, like usually what Meg will do is we'll cut these different pieces of metal and she'll lay them down on the table, and she won't even add any filler metal. She'll just take you know, what do you do? I'm taking the words out of your mouth.
Oh,
How do you?
listen, I just normally just lay the pieces down on the table and then just kind of,
Fuse it.
yeah, fuse it, yeah, that's the word. Yeah, I just fuse it, it's pretty simple, it doesn't take a lot of time, we go out to the shop and just make these pretty quickly, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it's also fun because the
So
result.
you're just using it, you don't need to use the filler, you just
Yeah.
use
Most of the time. If some places, you might just need to add a drop of filler here and there, but most of the time you don't need to. But if you're doing bigger projects or longer projects, you probably will have to.
Can you actually use that to kind of push the melted metal into place
Yes,
and just
yeah.
kind of,
It
so you
kind of,
almost,
because at first when you, it kind of just forms as a little bead.
right,
So.
you use that to draw it
yeah,
out and.
Yeah, it smooths it out and then, yeah.
So that's why if you have real precision with it, you have to sharpen it.
Yeah, because you might like dip into it and then that metal like gets onto the tip.
If you were to dip the metal, what you're hoping for with that is that really sharp end
Yeah.
will make when you hit the pedal down, and one of the advantages on the TIG, which is really neat, the reason we both like it a lot is when you pull the trigger on the MIG, it shoots wire out, okay? You can't pause. You're gonna, as long as, when you turn it on, wire's coming out, gas is coming out. With the TIG, you can actually hold it down here close to that and hit the pedal, and a little arc will jump, and it sort of illuminates things. They call it flashlighting. And you can
Yeah.
sort of just look at what you're doing and say, oh, I'm over here, I want to get a little closer. And then you've got the ability, what you set your MIG up for is if I hit, and the MIG, instead of using wire speed and voltage, the MIG uses just amperage. So that you would say, for example, if we were welding something like this, we might use 100 amps, okay? Now this metal gets hot as you're welding, and so if you just ran straight 100 amps, pretty soon it would get out of control. It would get too hot and might melt. So the pedal on the floor, when you set it for 100 amps, if she pushes the pedal all the way down, that's full pedal, that's gonna give 100 amps. Once she starts to get it so that it's welding okay and it's starting to heat up, she'll back that off. And if you look on the TIG machine I have, it shows the amperage, she might be down at 80 amps or something like that, so that she can, and as you go along, and if you're welding aluminum goes from, steel is handy because it has a color change. Aluminum just melts and it's gone. I mean, so you have to be very careful with the amount of heat that you put into aluminum. So it's very critical that you use that pedal if you're gonna TIG aluminum. But TIG is so nice because it's very precise. And you can sit there and if you say, I'm goofing something up, you let the pedal off and the whole process stops. Or you can let it off enough that you're just flashlighting or something, you can see what you're doing as you get, because you have to, when you go to class, if you do, and the guy teaches you, he's gonna have you with a pair of gloves like that, and you're gonna be holding this wire, and you're gonna have to continually feed the wire. You don't do it while you're welding, but you might feed it out, and then you're dabbing it, like she said, you'd be going along and going. The tool it'll make a little puddle, and you'll see that puddle, and you'll dab in the front of the puddle, and you move what's called the torch, it just mimics like a acetylene torch. You dab that along with it, but then this gets used up, and you sort of have to sneak it back out a little bit, and so you can back off the pedal so the melting stops, and get yourself a little more wire, and then dab along and you sort of do that process. And what they'll tell you when you go to class is that you take the wire, sit in front of the television at night, and just do this for like a couple hours. And then it becomes second nature to hold that and move it in. You don't really move it while you're dabbing, but you might go, you might be going this fast. Dab, 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 and then you stop for a second, you dab, 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 and you might extend it out a little bit in your hands, and then this would be used up, and you'll have a little tube sitting there next to you with a bunch of these sticking up like spaghetti out of a spaghetti holder, and you'll reach up and grab another one when they get really short, and then you'll
You go through
continue.
them pretty quickly.
Yeah. And this diameter you'd use for something really small like that, but if you were going to weld something bigger, you'd use a bigger diameter.
How much pressure do you use when you're on the gun end?
Well, actually, you can't touch if that touches the metal, it contaminates it. It'll either fuse to it, like it'll get stuck and you have to wiggle it back and forth and break it loose, or if you happen to be, and that's the tricky part of learning TIG, is if Meg was welding along and she was down there and she happened to touch the tungsten to the pedal, or to the puddle,
Hopefully not.
it's all done. Instead of having this really beautiful, the arc itself is about the size of a grain of rice. I mean, you're very close, and it's very little
Very
bright
small.
thing, very, very small. And as soon as you touch that, the end of it gets a ball on you, and instead of having this nice focused little thing, it's this, the sparks are sort of, the arc is going all over the place,
Yeah.
wandering, and you just
Disperses,
you can't use it, so.
And that's when you probably need to grind your
Pre-sharpen
tungsten.
Yeah.
Sharpen it.
So what we usually do, since we are
Learn-
still learning, is I'll have maybe 4 or 5 tungstens sitting there.
Sharpen
And
it.
what Meg will do is when she says, whoops, hear whoops, okay, and then she'll just screw this off on the back. And usually that, even though that's red hot when it's going, it'll cool down pretty quickly. And she'll either take the welper or her glove and just pull it out, slide another one in that's sharpened, and then Dad would sharpen another one up or whatever. But I probably go through more than she does. So, this was just something she threw. She said, maybe I should start making hope. And I'll show you some pictures. She did these things that say Steelers, and they're on a piece of diamond plate. They had a bunch of diamond plate there in pieces, and people really liked those. And then she made one bottle holder where it was a piece of steel. Imagine something that was sort of flat like this. And then it took us a while to figure out how to do it now. Piece like that, and then welded a piece of metal on it like this, but we first shaped this one into the shape of like a ski, the front of a ski. It got narrower, wider, and it was rounded at the top, and then she cut a hole through the middle of it so you can stick the wine bottle neck into it, and it's one of those things that almost looks like it's standing up in air. It just goes through there. And so she's done that with horseshoes, welded a bar from horseshoes for people that are horsey, different kinds of things, and has, I think what other things you've made. But a variety of different things that she's got ideas to make a bunch of other things, and we just sort of, we've got old clutch discs that you find at a junk store, or like Lubinecki's had them, and you can make super cool looking art things where you just take, a piece of base like this and weld several things on, and all of a sudden you have an art project. But there's a book at the library, which I was going to get, but the library, of course, is sort of closed right now. It's we're remodeling it now. I've been on board, and that's been a headache. But there's a really great book there by a woman called something like Weld for Fun, and she has like a zillion projects in it that are really cool that you could do. Anybody could do them, like things to hang, to hold coat hooks, or key hooks, or coat hangers, or art sculptures, and different kinds of things that you could make with just the metal you buy at Home Depot or Lowe's, and they're very simple. It's almost like one of those cookbooks that are like Cook's Illustrated, which says 30 minutes you can make something really good, or I could burn something in 30 minutes really well. But anyhow, so there's lots of resources to make things that you say those are really neat. So.
And you can also go on online and find stuff too. That's just start out. That's how we started. So. Yeah.
So when you use MIG versus TIG, I mean, TIG obviously for fine work and high-end applications, why your duty, like your tractor needs?
You know, I guess like certain things, the MIG is just really fast and really easy.
Okay.
So if somebody asked me, they said, hey, I want to make like a friend of mine said, hey, I want to make a thing that comes out of the receiver hitch of my truck that goes up, that has a movable thing that I can put my kayak so it sort of braces it on the back of a pickup truck. He had a headache rack, but he didn't have anything to hold the back of it. You can take just, 2-inch square tube, cut a V on it, put it together, and with the MIG, you're done in a minute. I mean, it's just, you pull the trigger and that's pushing out, and you weld about, it welds this fast. And it makes a really beautiful weld. It's not, I don't know that I want to put a boat together or something. I'm not going to say boat, I mean something like really heavy, but when you see like, if you go to see a piece of equipment like at the gym, a Nautilus piece of equipment, all those welds you see on that are done with a MIG, probably. I would say
Kind of a raised bead.
a raised bead, yeah. And you want the bead to be not, like, it's funny, both of us now, everything we see has welds, and it's just, man, look at the weld on this, I can do a better job than that. If you see the weld that's really tall, Meghan said, look how wormy that looks, or something like that.
You
And
start
get-
seeing stuff.
Yeah, you start to see things about it, but the MIG is, if you want to fix a mower deck or something like that, one of the things the MIG is really good about is it's not that sensitive to rust and things like that. And even, and stick is the best for that. Stick, you can use that red rod, the 60 here. This you can weld almost anything with that. I mean, if you wanted to weld something that you couldn't get into where you could grind it or anything like that, that's real tolerant of rust. But again, it sparks and it smokes and everything like that. The MIG is just a process. You could have our whole welding thing that we do in our wood shop. I bought a not clear, it's like a yellow welding screen, and I just hung it from the ceiling so it goes like this, like that, like this, and our whole welding thing, we can weld pretty much anything in there. There's a space about that big. And friends will bring Brian Simpson brought over his trailer, broke, or his axle or something like that, and we could get it in, we could put it in there, and it was really super handy. I've got the bottles behind it, and underneath my table, I have the TIG and the MIG, so that all that happens, she comes in, turns the gas on for whichever process she's gonna do, and flips the switch, and in like 30 seconds, she's making stuff, so.
Your gas is argon, right?
Well, for the TIG, it's argon, 100% argon, and for the MIG, it's 25% argon, 75% carbon dioxide. So that's called a C25 mix, and that's an inexpensive gas to buy for the MIG, and for the TIG, it has to have 100% argon. And if you wanted to weld something real tricky, you might get some helium that makes the whole process much hotter and everything, but for the majority of anything that anybody would need, a bottle about this big, and I can't,
5 cubic feet probably.
maybe not that much. I don't know what it is, but it's, that bottle would give you about an hour of trigger time with the MIG. So it lasts quite a while, and the bigger bottles like that would give you like probably 4 hours of trigger time. And I'll tell you what, we do a lot of welding, and I haven't replaced the big bottle for my MIG or my TIG yet. And the little bottle on my TIG or my MIG, I still have 500 psi gas in it, so and that's handy because I can put I can put that and that bottle in the trunk of the car and go and fix anything, so. Well, you've been really good that you haven't fallen asleep. Any questions or anything? Hopefully give you an idea of how.
So that will order all 3 processes?
This will do all 3 processes, and it will take the only thing that this welder won't do, and the reason I have another welder is, you cannot TIG aluminum with this. This is just a DC welder. And for aluminum attracts oxygen so quickly. Now you can use the spool gun for aluminum, but if you want to do TIG welding and you want to do real fine welding, the way that the AC TIG does, the spark jumps, the first spark jumps from the metal to the tungsten. it blows all the, and you've got this gas that's bathing the area. The first spark, since it's AC alternating current, the spark goes up to the tip of this. Okay, you can't see it. It makes a snapping kind of noise. It goes up and it blows all of the corrosion. Even if you scrub it completely clean, you won't know that there's some. As soon as it gets really hot, so it blows all that corrosion off, then the arc turns around and goes the other way. So it goes back and forth, and you can adjust on the machine how much up you want, or what percentage. So maybe it's 10% of the time it's coming up if the material's really clean or something, or maybe you have more of it if you're in an area where you need to clean the surface or you can't get quite as clean. So I have a dedicated TIG welder that's smaller than this even, that I have this hooked up, so when Meg and I are out there, you know, if we need to do the MIG, it's all ready to go, and flips that on and away you make, because a lot of times, like when she's making particularly like the ski thing, just sit there and weld that with the TIG. You could do it, but she can just hold that piece of metal there and get the MIG and just, you know, bzz, like that, just it's done. You know, the weld looks really nice and it's good, and it doesn't have to add any filler metal or anything else. It's just quick and easy. So that's a.
So where do you learn this? The VOTEC? Is that where they have courses?
The VOTEC has courses in the spring and the fall. They're usually Tuesdays and Thursday nights for 2 hours. It's about $180 or something, and for that, you have to bring your own. And you don't have to buy one of those jackets. You have to get your own helmet and your own pair of gloves. Everything else, the metal, the gas, the wire, and no matter what you do. And they actually, when you're first there, there's 2 guys that teach there, there's 3 people, but Brad Custard is the official instructor there, and also out at, I think, Cash or something. He does also a couple different places. And he is super tolerant and a great guy. And there's a guy that runs the Erie Institute of Technology's welding program, Doug Jordan, who comes down. And he was my first instructor there. And I said, I don't know what I'm doing. And he said, okay, we'll just go do it. I said, but we'll turn it on and go do something. And I said, what if I break it? He goes, that's great. Then you're going to figure out how to fix it. And so, you know, when I first started, I had all kinds of things happen, and it was the best learning experience to have. You know, he said, don't worry, this is all heavy-duty stuff. As long as you don't kill yourself, we can fix it. And I did a lot of things, which now I can take my whole. He said, I want you to be able to take your whole machine apart, put a new liner in here, and solve the problems, because it's like anything. Sometimes things happen, or you'll have the voltage. You'll have the current set up. This is DC positive right now, the ground, and so it's DC positive at the MIG gun. Sometimes you could hook it up the other way if you wanted to do another process. So sometimes you hook it up wrong. You say, why is this not working? And I've done enough mistakes. I've made every mistake. Not every one. I'm still finding new mistakes, but you know, I've made a lot of mistakes there, and they're very. It's Meg goes in and welds in there, and they're fantastic. I mean, you should not be intimidated at all about taking theirs. Actually, some of the best welders at the VOTEC right now are girls that are in the classes, and in the evening, quite often, I go and just do, like I'm trying to get better at TIG and TIG aluminum and stuff, so I go even to the beginning class, and I just go over to my machine and sit there and work on it, and Brad will come by if I need the help. But John DeArmond's daughter, Caitlin, welds in the VOTEC process, and she's going to be a mechanical engineer, but she's
very artistic. But she got second at national welding. It's a national welding competition, and so she had a really cool project that she did involving channel lock. It's really cool. So
you know,
she took classes at VOTEC.
And so she's a student there right now, and what they have told me, and Brad has said this several times, because I was frustrated that Meghan was making a much nicer TIG welds than I was, and he said, well, that seems to be the case, that the eye-hand coordination that females have is better than men. And the other side of it too is that, you know, welding might have looked like it was something that was, if you came out of VOTEC right now and you had your certifications, without a question, the hottest job thing right now is welders. Every single welder in the area is being siphoned off to go work at the cracker plant down in Monaca. And the money that you can make welding is phenomenal. I mean, you know, you're gonna maybe not make as much as an eye surgeon or something, but it's a lot of money. It's a clean process, very safe now. You know, the danger of it and everything. Like I said, it's so I mean, you know, they're trying to find students right now because the demand is outpacing the supply for welding. So if anybody likes using their hands or whatever, you know, I think it's like the most fun thing I do. When I go out there and put the hood down and we're making something, we've got stereo out there, Megan puts on some jazz, and we're sitting there, you know, saying, why don't we try this? And oh, Dad, I saw that, why don't we do this? And so we've just tried making anything, and we can, you know. So.
You don't have $250,000 in debt.
What's that? No. Like I said, I'd encourage any young person I talk to now, because it's a very technical field. You can write your own ticket, and it's, if you like it, it's a combination of art and process. There's something, when you look at when you talk to any of these good welders, they want to have a shiny, you see some of the stainless stuff that they do, and in the class, it's gorgeous. I mean, if you look at it, you say, how did they do that weld? And it's practice, but it's a perfect fusing of art and practice together if you like doing that kind of thing. So there's a lot of variety, like I said. There people do underwater welding. There's, you know, lots of different types of welding, and I've just sort of described a few of them. There are a bunch of different welding. I mean, if you went online, you'd see welding that you'd say submerged arc welding and all these different kinds of things that I have no idea how to do it. We're just sort of hobbyists. So.
Thank you
That
very
was
much.
really cool.
Rob.